Bill Gates, thank you for sitting down with me. We always appreciate you making time for GeekWire.
Great to see you.
So your book, Source Code, My Beginnings, it's a memoir really about the extraordinary circumstances of your early years in Seattle and Harvard and the very early stages of Microsoft in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I've read it, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I have lots of deep and meaningful questions that I want to ask you during our time here together. But I have to start, based on our past conversations, by giving you a little bit of a hard time. There's no mention of Burger Master in this book.
That's true. Or Dick's. Where's the cuisine?
Exactly. Well, no, you talked a little bit about Burger Train and other places that you would go to celebrate your business deals. Of course, you will be having 2 more installments, if I understand correctly, in this memoir. So a little bit of time later on in those editions to talk about Seattle's iconic burger chain. So
at the end of this book, we're just moving back to Seattle,
Yes.
1979. And, Microsoft only has about 18 employees. And so the real Microsoft in Seattle story is just beginning.
And I'm looking forward to that second installment. But I have to tell you, this was really a remarkable experience to read this book. It felt like someone was taking a familiar black and white sketch, filling it out, and painting it in color. Just your whole life story, and especially the early years. And it's got some fascinating twists and turns. What do you hope people will take away from this book and from your story of growing up?
Well, I was unbelievably lucky, and I had a lot of fun talking about my mom, who was amazing, and I had a complicated relationship with her that, somehow motivated me. My dad, I have such incredible admiration for the example he set. There's a lot of times in my early career where he helps out, and I learned a lot from him. And then, the 2 other people who are prominent in this phase of my life are Kent Evans, who tragically dies when I'm in 11th grade, and then Paul, who was 2 years ahead of me at Lakeside. But then after Kent is killed, he comes back and helps me with the scheduling program. And we, got very intense in terms of, okay, we're going to start a company when, what, from that summer of the scheduling, we kind of had that commitment.
You mentioned Kent, and it really struck me the depth of your friendship with him, your relationship with him, and I couldn't help but wonder, because as you acknowledge at the end of the book, you were destined to do something together as adults, to work together. He introduced you to the concept of software licensing, and a lot of the business principles that he would research. Do you ever stop and think what Microsoft or whatever you would have created might have been like had he lived?
Yeah, at the end of the book, I fly out on a seaplane from my house on Lake Washington out to Alderbrook, a resort out on Hood Canal. And I run into Marvin Evans, Kent's father, which is like, wow, I hadn't seen him for quite a while. And he and I reminisced about, boy, those early days set the trajectory that led to Microsoft, and it would have been great to have Kent as part of that. It's hard to know, but Kent did a couple of things for me. He even in 8th and 9th grade was thinking, okay, should we be ambassadors or generals or CEOs? And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And, okay, which of those jobs is more fun? Who makes more money? And I was like, oh, God. And, he got me reading Fortune magazine. So he had this very, out in the world thing. He was also in some ways, more, he was getting good grades across the board. He was in the independent study where I was still kind of in this, hey, act like I don't care except in math, and not, work as hard. But he was very intense. And so, he was by far my closest friend. There were 4 of us, the 2, Rick and Paul, who were 2 years ahead of us. And we were closer than you'd think, given that 2-year gap, because we were spending all this time in the computer room. But, Kent was the one I was talking to every night, and, brainstorming about things. And Paul by the time I'm a junior in high school, he's gone off and does his first year at Washington State University. And I've committed to Lakeside School to do the full year scheduling. I had kind of patched up the trimester by trimester mess because I had figured out how to do it, but I needed help to get that done. And so that really is when my relationship with Paul strengthened, and he sort of stepped in to the role that Kent would have played. Now, Paul in his own way was very unique. Paul was the one reading about Moore's Law and telling me this exponential improvement thing, which I was like, Paul, do you know that's mind blowing? Everybody should be, running around shouting, because that means computing will be free. So, I got the benefit of Kent's unique thinking and Paul's unique thinking, and even Rick, although to a lesser degree.
Paul was also the person who introduced you to LSD.
That's right. He got me drunk. He gave me pot. This guy was a problem. Jimi Hendrix. I mean, he made me listen to that music.
I love it because you've got the multiple forces in your life with the people around you. Of course, your mom was this stabilizing force with high expectations. Your dad would ask, "Are you organized?" as his way of saying, "Do you have your life in order?" And Paul would ask, "Are you experienced?"
No, Paul loved handing me challenges, so the original thing, where that computer terminal is there and people are befuddled by it, I had done so well on a math exam that Paul was literally the one who said, "Oh yeah, you think you're so smart, can you figure this thing out?" And kind of drew me into it, and I brought Kent along.
Yeah.
And so that really, by the time a month or two had gone by, we were the super intense there all the time for people.
Yes. So hearing you talk about this era and seeing you light up as you do, I can tell you've been reliving this through the process of writing
Absolutely.
this book. What has it been like for you to revisit these years? I can imagine it might be painful at times because there's some painful introspection that happens, but what have you learned about yourself through this process of writing this first memoir?
It's not my normal thing to be looking backwards. I mean, even when Microsoft would have our, 10th anniversary, I'd be like,
What's next?
hey, we got to survive and move faster than everybody else. And this looking backwards thing, I don't know. But, because I'm turning 70, Microsoft's turning 50, the foundation 25, my dad would have been 100. It actually has been very interesting. Making sure I explain all these different opportunities I got, talking about my relationship with my mom. My dad, I was 10 times more time interacting with my mom, because my dad goes to work early, he comes back and at dinner time. But, he was so amazing. And I have a lot of, cases, I think 3 cases where my dad, in the relationship with ISI on the payroll program, a time at Harvard when I almost get in trouble, and then business dispute with our first customer, MITS, where my dad, offers very good advice and helps me stay, focused on solving the problem. And so, the appreciation of my dad and his role. And of course, later he helps start the Gates Foundation. He and Patty Stonecipher are the first CEOs of the foundation. The luck I had with my parents is just incredible. And so I do when I'm working on this. It actually is slower than normal things. So it'll give me 50 pages to edit, and it'll take 3 times longer than I think because I'm kind of thinking back to those days. And I remember it all very vividly. My sister Christy, who read it and said, "Oh, this is fantastic." She's like, "How did you remember all these things?" Well, partly Rob Guth is going and, talking to everybody who's still around and getting my report cards. I thought I got straight A's in 9th grade. It turns out I got a B. I was, shocked that my recollection was so kind to myself that, I try to be careful about fooling myself. And in that case, I had done that.
Rob Guth, the former Wall Street Journal reporter who's now on your team, reading this book made me think everybody should have a journalist who, as they're approaching their 70s, go back and research their lives. Although, as you say, there might be some surprises in there.
My parents encouraged me to talk to adults. And so my social skills that were slow to develop, I was much better at talking to adults than I was even to sort of most of my peer group. I mean, okay, some kids who are like me, like Kent, I was able to have great friendships with. But that thing of talking to adults, it comes from my parents having, lots of events at their house with friends or related to my dad's career. That was invaluable, that I would ask some questions. The way my dad would share lawsuits, and explain, okay, this is what antitrust means. It's like, oh wow, so interesting.
Well, you also acknowledged toward the end of the book something that I don't think you've said publicly before, and so I wanted to ask you about this. You write, if I were growing up today, I'm sure that I would be diagnosed on the autism spectrum. Why was it important for you to write that or to say that publicly?
Well, I think it's a level of honesty there, that when I would do a 200-page Delaware report and I would turn that in, and everybody else's report's like 10 pages, I was like, oh shoot,
And yours had a wooden cover.
Yeah, oh, mine was incredible. Maps and, key to my career has been my knowledge of Delaware. And so, so it's kind of embarrassing. And it's like, wow, I am different. Why did I do that? And kids can kind of, they're intimidated by it, so they kind of make fun of it. And, the fact that social situations, okay, who do I sit with and how do people perceive this thing, and I'm miscuing, or even that I, when I'm thinking, still to this day, and people give me a hard time when I'm thinking hard without even, I'll start kind of rocking, which is kind of like a stimming, comforting behavior. I claim it's because, my parents put me to sleep on a rocking horse or had a rocking crib or something. But, there's no doubt there would have been a more formal notion of, okay, you're good at these things and not at these things. And I do think it's valuable for anybody who's different to see that, I was able to take that and make it a strength.
And then lastly, you've gone through this process of introspection about your childhood, and you're going to be doing it through your Microsoft career and beyond. Has it changed how you're thinking about your own life from here, and how you're going to continue and ultimately finish this story of Bill Gates on planet Earth?
Well, turning 70, is stunning to me because, in a certain sense, there were no old people in the personal computer industry. I mean, somebody in their 40s, like when I hired John Shirley, it's like, oh, this old guy, who actually is an adult. Let's see if we can fit him into this revolution. Now I feel like, wow, I still have some ability to understand and, even help guide these things a little bit. So, it's so different than when I was young, thinking, okay, older people really could never figure out the important things. I probably have, with a little bit of luck, 20 years where I can play an active role. And so in my full-time job, which is the foundation job, Mark Sussman and I and the team over the course of this year will talk about what our goals are for the rest of this time, for the next 20 years, and say, okay, we have headwinds, but, our values and, the things we're going to stay, in those areas because, a lot of great things have happened. And so we'll, try and renew the vision of the foundation for the years ahead. So I'm excited to do that. The climate work, there'll be some policy things that are less favorable, but even so, I think the theory of innovation, making cheap, clean technology is one of the few things that survives the less willingness to subsidize. but yeah, it when you write a book like this, it does make you think, okay, boy, I have a limited amount of time. How do I want to focus my time? Which goals do I want to work on? And I want to take the money that I'm lucky enough to have from Microsoft and have the foundation spend it, to the greatest impact possible.
The book is Source Code, My Beginnings. Bill Gates, thank you very much for talking with me.
Thanks, Todd.